Okay. Yes, and I think I might leave them like that so that I can see them if that's okay. All right. And okay. All right. And I'll take it from you that people can see them as well. Okay. All right. Apologies I wasn't able to join properly. That tech tripped me up. I'll have a second attempt tomorrow for my workshop. And I will keep you all on time. I'll keep to 2:30. So I'm sort of hot off the subs bench to present for Matt, and I'm delivering some material which a mix of some stuff that a couple of people have seen before. And Mahmood, can you just confirm that my slides are going through okay? Okay. There you go. There you go. Okay. So in this bite-sized keynote of 15 minutes or so, title is I Wish I Was Deep Instead of Macho. The point there is, and there is a wider point which we kind of pick up in the session tomorrow, is how we kind of raise the analyst voice and make it a bit louder. And I think a lot of stuff is kind of coming together at the right time, but I'm still, and you are probably dialed in partly because you believe that we still don't have a proper um, analyst voice on every board in the country. So I'm going to illustrate this because you'll have seen a whole load of slideshows, some of which you'll remember, some of which you'll forget. And I'll try to make it kind of as visual as possible with some of my favorite films. The first one here is a kind of logo that we picked up for the Chief Data Analytical Officer Network, which I'm the national chair of, which is great fun. We started a couple of years ago, and we felt that there was a space for a sort of professional network for senior analysts, notwithstanding all of the great things around it, like AFA and FedIP and what the strategy unit do and the health economics unit and this HACA event itself. We thought it would be useful to have a network of senior analytical folk. And that can be simple things like Teams channels. It can be traditional things like an annual event and monthly webinar series. And we have a kind of an active presence on the AFA website, but also through LinkedIn as well. So please kind of give us a follow if you want. Whenever I speak these days, I put this slide up because that's kind of how I feel that I'm towards the end of the road, and what I need to do is kind of clear it for a sort of younger, ambitious analytical leaders to kind of come along. So I'll say a few things, make of it kind of what you will. Okay, so one of the first films here, this is a phrase that my wife coined when we had the FDP letters, which was jolly good fun, as you'll all remember. It's always a joy to get called in by your chief exec, who's just had a text from the chief exec of the NHS telling you to be quiet. But I think when we coalesced as a professional network and put in what I hope were and still are very quite dry but objective challenges to the FDP program, we got the response that we needed, I'll say, as opposed to wanted. The theme of this presentation is what we have to move away from is people kind of sitting in the background, hidden behind quite complicated dashboards that people don't really use, coming up with some quite clever techniques that no one's really aware of and that don't really affect any decisions. And sometimes you have to stick your neck out and say, if you are going to deliver a federation of data at a national level, that sounds like a really exciting opportunity. But there's a whole load of things that could be done better. And I think out of those letters, we've seen some really positive change. So we've seen a roadmap coming for all of the national commissioning data sets being launched. We've seen the ability introduced of the FDP to export data, as opposed to being this kind of black hole that has to hoover up everything and be done in one place all of the time. So that's worked quite well. But that is okay if you've got quite a thick skin like me, but is more difficult if you're a younger analyst coming through, because sticking your neck out doesn't feel very comfortable when you do it. And it hasn't been fantastically comfortable for me at times, but I think we're on the side of the angels and we've had a really good response. I'm now on the FDP check and challenge group. We have regular calls with the professional leaders in our area. We're hooked into a whole load of stuff around the FDP program. So that's really good. And now we've recently been invited into how this network can support the development of the single patient record, which is really good. So what we had with them, for example, was a challenge where we said, okay, have you got some data people on this? Because, I haven't been called. And they said, oh, we've spoken to some clinicians and some CIOs. And I repeated my question, which is, have you spoken to anyone that knows anything about data? Because it isn't those two groups of people. There is this odd perception that if you have a clinician involved in developing a digital or data application, it makes it a better one. It might do. It might make the user interface slightly easier for the clinician, but it doesn't create fantastic data integration layers, level of SNOMED, CT at the right level, and so on. So we are now nationally hooked into the things that we should be into, which is really good. And there'll be a lot of conversations in your ICBs and in ours about data and digital convergence, and they have quite long timescales. What would it be like if we were on the same EPR and the same PAS, and everyone was on the FDP, and it all linked up to the NHS app, and we had GP data flowing with no IG issues, and so on. It's really exciting that we're talking about all those things, but they are on a bit of a roadmap, and you're going to have to have chief analytical officers at the center of that. And that's why I picked A Complete Unknown as the next film. And if those of you have watched it, I wasn't going to watch it because I thought there's no one who could look like Bob Dylan and sound like him. And incredibly, he looks and sounds exactly the same as it. It's absolutely amazing. So I'd recommend it to anyone. And one of the themes in the film is quite interesting because Joan Baez is kind of an established star, and then Bob Dylan comes along, and it was quite a nice analogy for me of, all these sort of Wally CIOs that we've had for the last 20 or 30 years, messing up the huge opportunity to have an integrated data layer, and now need to kind of politely just step to the side while the 400 odd people on this call get together and figure out how to link data. The software is kind of by the by, really. That is not where the time should be spent, and it's not where the money should be spent on these huge procurement decisions, whether it's buying a big American EPR or an FDP solution or whatever it is. The software is not the key thing. The key thing is a linked data set, data standards, use of things like SNOMED, use of canonical data models and OMOP mapping, and so on. Those are where the time and effort should be spent. And I think we just gently need to be the Bob Dylan, and kind of Joan got a bit cross in the film because Timothy Chalamet playing Bob Dylan came along and sort of stole her sunlight. And I think that's the role that you lot need to take now. The next film, thanks for sharing, which some of you may have seen. This is just a reminder of from a few years ago, the Goldacre report. We have to adopt those standards, have to proactively share your work. What we don't need is people creating IP on their own, locking it down, trying to sell it, trying to protect it, and so on. Every time you start a piece of analysis, you should be thinking, how could I document this so that any other analyst in any other ICB or provider could use it? That is the absolute message to take away from that. I'll share these slides after, but there's links there to the Goldacre review, links through to good process like GitHub, and so on. One of the issues that we pick up tomorrow is the kind of role of the consultant in all of this. And you'll have your own views on whether that type of consultancy, which now runs to about £4 billion, just say that number again, about £4 billion across government in this area, wasn't even known in the select committee hearing. That's the evidence there on the left from David Nicholson. And I do think there is something about how, when things get a bit difficult and people say, we're not very good at data around here, a phone call goes off to the usual sorts of people. There is a role for consultancy, but it's got to be very, very, very specific. But to enable that, all of you need to louden your voice at board level. And that's having, fantastic linked data, brilliant data visualizations, getting through the IG, and getting into proper evaluation technique as well, so that you have a proper, considered, respected voice at board level. We need to move away from this kind of infantilizing that we do with management consultancy. Some of these films are are kind of more my age than some of you, but something that always stuck with me before I worked in the NHS, which I've been in not for that long compared to some of you, about 15 years. I was at Dr. Foster for 10 years, working for a nutcase called Tim Kelsey, who had previously been the Sunday Times editor, claimed to have found Mary Magdalene's remains in France, I think. But what worked quite well at Dr. Foster was that we kind of got people's attention, and we took something quite complex statistically, like a hospital standardized mortality rate, and did the sophisticated, rigorous thing by working with the university, with Brian Jarman and Paul Allen and others. But we also talked to the patients and talked through the media at it about the work that we were doing, whether it was Bristol Royal Heart Infirmary or Mid Staffs or wherever it was. And if you haven't seen Glenn Ross, the model within it is that, and the way to express it is that nothing happens until somebody sells. So to make that relative to your roles, that is, you can build the best dashboard in the world, no one ever looks at it. It's kind of a waste of time. If you haven't got it through onto people's mobiles, into their workflow, into automated emails in a way that is relevant for them, it's kind of a waste of time. So nothing happens till somebody sells, I would kind of take from that. And then the last film that we kind of come to, and I think this sort of represents the really difficult time that everyone is going through at the moment with sort of huge change. You know, I've got a role across an acute provider and an ICB, and we've got voluntary redundancy schemes, and we've got consultations coming, and potentially compulsory redundancy schemes, all sorts of things, at the same time as a whole load of recommended new guidance about what strategic commissioner is, how we analyse inequalities data, and so on. But the kind of message from this film is, and this scene, if people have seen Life of Brian will remember, but this scene is towards the end where Brian is carrying his cross to be crucified, and they just need to just at that moment actually get up and go on and do it. I get a bit impatient with this type of data, which would be from organisations as kind of worthy as the Health Foundation, which is vaguely interesting but not that interesting and isn't particularly actionable. You have to kind of use your data to kind of get up and get out there and do something. And in an example, this is some work that we've done down at East Kent, where we've used a name profiling tool to look at a particular issue, a maternity issue in this example, in much more detail than the sort of crummy ethnicity data that flows out of the census. Because we can look at it at that level and go down and into which things are statistically significant, we can then build it into statistical models and actually make a change to how we're running things. So in this example, we took data about people's backgrounds and their likelihood to DNA an outpatient appointment, to not come to an outpatient appointment. But instead of just finding that out, we went and created a patient tracking list, developed different strategies for people, evaluated it, and found that we halved the DNA rate in the area that we did. So we got up from our desks, if metaphorically speaking, and kind of went and did something with it. Okay. Mahmouda, I've run through that really quick just because I didn't want to create any more delay. I'm conscious you've got control of the chat. Is there anything you want me to answer while you've got me? Okay. Canonical data model. I can say it. Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. I think the theme of the FDP letters that we did and other conversations have been, as providers and ICBs, we send a load of data into the centre the whole time, and we very rarely get any of it back. So at the very least, if we could start having all of that national CDS data flowing back to us so that we could much more easily start to do benchmarking and all sorts of things, I think that'd be really good. I think what happens, the next bit of the answer to that question is that when these Wally CIOs go out and procure systems, they have no thought for how we organise the data below them. So if people like on this call could be in the room going, can we just make sure that when we buy the new theatre system, it adheres to the National Theatre Theatre's canonical data model? That would at least be a start. At the moment, what you have is IT departments and suppliers going, well, we're standing up this new PAS system. We'll just call the wards ABC. And then people on this call are going, well, they're not called ABC. They're called 1, 2, 3. And if you call them 1, 2, 3, that makes possible all of this other data linkage over there. So the canonical data model isn't the answer to everything, but it is absolutely an example of how the principles should be done, which is that everybody should record data in the same way, in the same structure, acknowledging that there will be local instances. One of the things that we'll talk about at our CDAO conference next year is left shift. So everyone's going, we're going to left shift. That all sounds great. There's no data over there. So starting to think about what a canonical data model might be for, third sector commissioning data sets is quite interesting. So I think it's an example of something that adheres to our principles, acknowledging that there'll always be some, clinical data, for example, that is beyond a canonical data model.
I've got to unmute in two places, I've realized, so people didn't actually hear my little blip there. But thank you so much, Mark, not least because the last time I heard this, I know you recommended lots of movies, so now I've actually got the full list now, which I can take away. But really thank you for putting up with the tech as well and persevering with it. And you deserve a medal just for your patience with it and carrying on. And I know you've come in last minute as well, which we really appreciate. But we're hearing again from you tomorrow.
Anytime.
And you're back
Always
with more, aren't you? So we look forward to that. So please do, people, join us back for that panel session and more from Mark and others tomorrow. But thank you, Mark. I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can carry on with the rest of the program. But hopefully we can get you back on to actually join us for more this afternoon as well. So thank you, Mark.